So beyond the TARDIS I'd have to say the Millennium Falcon and BB-8 are probably the most technologically advanced looking props that I have. TARDIS is downstairs. Plus, there's one way back there behind Hedgewig. Um, so, new things about Vegapunk. So we got a little bit more about Vegapunk in the most recent chapter. We got introduced to the other three bodies that we hadn't seen yet. We'd already met Lilith and Shaka and Atlas, and now we've met Edison and Pythagoras and York, not Yoke. So I kind of wanted to start off this bit about things that the Vegapunk and Egghead Island itself at the moment kind of remind me of, or kind of made me think of over the last couple of weeks in regards to other things that we've seen on the island so far. Blatant Star Wars reference. There's a lightsaber thing that Bonnie found in the last chapter. Obviously, that's a blatant reference there. The whole thing about, okay, so at the end of the chapter, which I'm not really going to go into in this video, but, you know, we kind of find out the Egghead, even though it's called the Island of the Future, is actually more like an island of the past, according to Shaka. So kind of in a long ago in a galaxy far, far away, set up with that. So yeah, I just wanted to go through and mention some of the things that it kind of made me think of and why it was funny. So obviously there's the food replicator that we see, or the food producer or whatever that we see, obviously. That's probably just Oda trying to do a reference to Star Trek and everything, which is perfectly fine. I've always loved the replicator in Star Trek. I always thought that it was so cute. Although they have specifically mentioned in one of the episodes, probably in more than one episode in several of the series, that even though they can replicate like food and items like that, because when they make the food for the replicator, it also produces like, you know, a glass or the cup or the plate and the fork and like the stuff that the food's in. It doesn't just like slop a bunch of soup on the top of the replicator. It's just like, no, there is a bowl that the soup goes in, and it creates that as well. So we see that, but it's also stated that they don't have, that they don't make clothing with the replicator. That it is just like food and objects. They don't make clothing because I guess that messes with like the economy of Earth or something like that, or the economy of the Federation. They do state that there are like bazaars on the ship, as in like a shop, like a bazaar, like a like a galleria or something along those lines that you can go to and buy stuff, which makes sense. So there's that concept that they do reference, even though some of the stuff that some of the Straw Hats are wearing that the Straw Hats and Bonnie and such are wearing probably could somewhat, you know, pass in the Star Trek universe, as different outfits. Possibly could also pass in the Star Wars universe as some interesting outfits as well. So there's that. Also, I remember at one point, for some reason, I remember in one of the various Star Trek: The Next Generation episodes I've seen, I just remember that like a replicator produced like a bear for a little girl from her parents, and it's just like, oh, here's a bear, as in like a stuffed bear, not like an actual living bear. Then there's the food thing. Also reminded me of the microwave from Spy Kids. So there's, of course, like the early 2000s movie that's, you know, with Antonio Banderas and everything, and Spy Kids and all this other stuff, and like, you know, Junie and, you know, the sister have to go to the, Junie and Carmen have to go to, you know, the hideaway island or whatever. And, you know, they have this microwave and they put like these little food packs into the microwave, and pop, you get instant McDonald's or instant whatever else you put into the microwave. And I always thought that that seemed kind of cool. So there's that, and that kind of also, you know, the food dispenser thing that they have on the island on Egghead kind of reminded me of that as well. The dog is whining at me. Yes, can I help you? Okay. Speaking of dogs, perfect segue. Thank you, Rainy. So there's also the little the recycler dog that we see. It's one panel in the chapter, but it's adorable in like the junkyard area. It's just like, oh look, it's a dog that's eating everything to recycle it. I'm like, okay, that's adorable. And that made me, of course, think of Techno, the robotic puppy. I had one of these for a long time. I have no idea where it ended up. I probably donated it at some point in time, although if I still had it, it would have been a great prop for this. Also, there's like so many different variations of Techno that you could have gotten, or so many different variations of like different robotic dogs and stuff like that, that you could get. So, those were a big thing in like the late 90s into the early 2000s or so when I would have had mine. So there's that reminded me of Techno and everything. And then of course Kuma in and of himself is kind of a reference to the Terminator anyway, the T-1000 and everything. I'd kind of say the more the Seraphim are probably a little bit closer to the T-1000, given the fact that they look a lot less harmful than they could be, and the fact that they look like children. Although given what we see the Jinbei one demonstrate in this chapter, also Seraphim Jinbei, not surprising. Also, given what we see that one demonstrate in the chapter, clearly they're all very strong anyway, and they even state that this one isn't like matured enough yet. So there's that, and then of course going into that, in the previous chapter, well, not the previous chapter, but the chapter before that, where we saw the Kuma cop. So that's a RoboCop. Yeah, I know. The Terminator and the Kuma as RoboCop has already been done multiple times already. But I already know that joke's already been made. Obviously, so is a Star Trek replicator and everything. Although I don't know if anyone else has brought up the microwave from Spy Kids, although I'm sure someone brought up like Techno. The other thing that I did want to mention that this kind of made me think of was, because when I'm going through and like kind of doing like figuring up research or doing notes for this video, I'm like, well, what other, I was typing in like evil robots, which I'll go into a couple more of those when I get to some of the other things about the specific Vegapunks, but evil robots in movies and shows and stuff. And there's some of, various things pop up. Obviously, there's the Terminator that pops up. That tends to be on the top of the list of like evil robots. There's, HAL from, 2001 A Space Odyssey. There's several other evil robots and stuff like that we see in different movies and in TV shows and in anime and just, various books and everything. Take your pick. There's evil robots everywhere. And one of the other things is there's also this movie that was called Robots, just called Robots. It came out in 2005. I remember this movie. It was about this like robotic society, so it's just like all these robots and like they have all like regular jobs and stuff like that, and there's like big corporations and like all these other types of things that go into it. And it actually had a fairly decent cast, in all honesty. It had Ewan McGregor, it had Halle Berry, Greg Kinnear, Mel Brooks, Amanda Bynes, Drew Carey, Robin Williams. It had a fairly decent cast, in all honesty. And I remember the movie. I mean, I don't think I ever owned it on like VHS, and I know I don't have it on DVD, but I remember seeing it at some point in time. Small town robot boy has to overcome giant corporation that is run by, I don't know, in all honesty, I'd probably say he could qualify as somewhere between like an Elon Musk type character, given everything going on with Twitter right now, and a Jeff Bezos, something along those lines, evil, maniacal robot and everything. And his mother is an evil robot, not surprised, called Madame Gasket, which I'm like, okay, points there. She looks very creepy. I remember that movie. I don't remember a huge else amount about it because it's been a long time since I've seen it. But, small town boy saves world and gets girl and is the end of the movie, and the bad guys all get punished or whatever, dropped into like a pit of molten metal or something. I don't remember what the end of the movie was. It's been so long. But the other thing that I thought of was, okay, so I'm gonna take us back a bit. So, late 90s, early 2000s kids, mid 90s into the early 2000s, and even into the mid 2000s kids used to watch Cartoon Network. Who remembers Toonami? Who remembers Toonami? Toonami Block, there was animation in the afternoon. That's where I got introduced to Sailor Moon and Card Captors, and I know that Dragon Ball Z was there, and they had like Gundam and other things like that. And all those things. And then like later on they had like weekend night blocks and stuff like that, where they had a bit more uncut anime. And I know that Toonami like went away for a couple of years at one point in time, because like whoever was in charge of Cartoon Network decided that they didn't want to do Toonami anymore for whatever reason, and then it came back a couple of years later. And I think it's still going now. I tried to see if I could find if it was officially still going now, but I think it is. But of course, I think they're like airing One Piece now, and they've got Attack on Titan. They would also do video game reviews. Who remembers the host of Toonami? Who remembers Tom? So, Tom, or Toonami Operations Module, he is the host of Toonami, and he's had like 6, kind of ish 7 different variations of himself. And I'm sitting there like, I want to look up look up Tom thing when I'm doing this research and everything. And I believe One Piece at one point used to air on Toonami. I think it currently is airing. I think they have like the Punk Hazard arc or something like that they're airing right now on Toonami, which still puts them even further behind, but okay. And I think Toonami is still on right now. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But I looked up that and it was just like, Tom, that's right. And I remember that like at one point, I remember that Tom, quote unquote, had to, like he died and then he had to get like a new body. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at like, they have this lineup of like all the different Toms. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Vegapunk. Not quite Vegapunk. Although, well, I highly doubt that I was about to say that Yoda. That's wrong. Yoda. That Oda. I don't know if he would know about Toonami, and even if he did, I don't think he would necessarily be trying to throw out that big of a reference into the show or into One Piece. But if he did, that would be kind of fun. But Tom is the sarcastic, wisecracking personality. The Matrix developed and downloaded into these robot shells and everything that he can then, if one dies, then he can download into a new one. So somewhat like the Doctor regenerating and everything. They still have all the same memories and everything. And then he has like his co-host that is this AI named Sarah. And they've given him like an origin story, and that's been retconned, and he has like these responsibilities of like maintaining the ship that like broadcasts out the Toonami signal and everything. And I just thought that was adorable. And there's been like 6 different versions, kind of 7, because there's one that was like, there's like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 3.5, a 5, and a 6. So I just like, there's like a bunch of them. And like, there's like different canon deaths for each one of them. So it's a little bit like the Doctor, and the fact that they have like canon deaths and everything. And like, Tom does like, video game reviews and does interviews and like movie teasers and stuff like that. Does like different commentaries and things like that. Yeah, like his own adventures that him and Sarah went on, when like they would be like interacting with different things that would appear on the ship or that were different threats. And I got very nostalgic when I'm sitting there like, I remember these. So like I looked it up and I was just like, yay, Tom. So I wanted to bring that up there. Moving into the main thing that I wanted to do for this video. So clearly in the anime, we're probably not going to get to the Vegapunks for a little bit longer. And even then, we just got the reveal of the other 3 in this one, and we still technically don't know what the main body looks like. So I was like, well, I'm just going to design my own chart to fill in the gaps for at the moment of what I think, for like, these are going to be different placeholders for the different Vegapunks until we actually get more information, in regards to like the way that the anime will have them look. Because, Shueisha and manga panels is sometimes hard to deal with. So let's start from the top. So most people, when it comes to Vegapunk, when it comes to, the way that we've heard about him for the past 10 longer years and everything that we've known about him since, technically since the post-Ennis Lobby arc, and then, a little bit more and more as it went on. We kind of picture him as like, the Doc Brown from, Back to the Future. Some people put him as like, Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. Still haven't ever really seen Rick and Morty. Sorry, it's not on my list. I still also have not seen Back to the Future. I've seen Back to the Future Part 1 partway through, and then it just got too weird for me. At that point in time, I'd probably end up liking the other two a little bit more, though. Nothing against, any of the cast, but still. So there's, most people put, Doc Brown as, as old Vegapunk, as old man Vegapunk, or as like kind of like the Stella body. So we're going to do, Doc Brown there, for that. I still kind of think he's one that's like, whenever we hear them referred to as like old man Vegapunk, that's probably the one that they're referring to, because none of the other ones we've seen look like an old man. Yeah, Lilith kind of talks like an old man, or like an old timer, but not necessarily it clearly does not look like one. So we'll see what happens there. And that version of Vegapunk may actually be probably not dead, but like, the way that Shaka talks is like, oh, well, I'm probably going to die soon. Does that mean the main body is going to die? Does that mean Shaka himself is going to die? We'll see. Moving on to Shaka. Shaka had a great moment in this chapter that I really liked. Well, Shaka/Robin had this really good moment that I liked. Because, like, Shaka just shows up and, like, tells the Jinbei robot to stop attacking them, and then tells, like, Lilith and Edison and Pythagoras of, like, okay, you've had enough. Go back to work. Lilith, spoil sport. And everything. Well, darn it. Damn spoil sport. And Shaka, like, ends up looking at the Straw Hats, and John's just like, why can't I move? My feet won't move. And Shaka's like, well, I can individually control all the different magnets in this floor, so your feet won't move because you have those shoes on. Which, I'm pretty sure that that's just like, okay, anybody that comes into this lab, you get them into these clothing, whether they work here, whether they're pirates, whether they're Marines, whatever, you put them in this clothing unless I've told you otherwise. I'd say Dragon might be like an exception to that rule, although admittedly seeing Dragon in like futuristic clothing that the Straw Hats are wearing would kind of be kind of fun. I would say see the Revolutionary Army and that stuff. Ivankov would have a fun time trying to figure out like the best body to wear with all of those clothing. But that'd be funny. Now I want to see that. Oh god. Vegapunk has like them all pinned to the floor because it's just like, okay, well, I don't always trust pirates and everything. And I'm like, okay, valid point there, dude. He just like, pins them to the, has them all pinned to the floor. Like they can't, their legs won't move, so they can't go anywhere. And he's just like, oh, well, I control everything in here and everything. And Robin goes, so resistance is futile? My brain went, Borg reference. I have no idea if that's going to be in the official translation or not. I really hope it is. Because if it's not, if it is, that's just even more funny. Because it's just like, okay, Oda threw that in there. And I'm okay with that. Even if it's just like the fake translation or the fan translation, I'm still okay with that. It's just funny. It's like, resistance is futile. We are the Borg. We will assimilate you. Oh god, so many Star Trek references. Also kind of like Cybermen references in that regard as well. If you want to go to the Doctor Who stuff. Because dork. Also, I'm recording this literally right before Election Day. So please go vote, people. Please go vote. If you haven't voted already, please go vote. Register to vote. Vote. Wherever you live, please vote. Just wanted to throw that in there. One Piece is not necessarily a democracy. Our country is. The U.S. is a democracy, and please make sure that gets to stay that way. But for Vegapunk, the resistance was futile. I just thought that was funny. A lot of people throw out, oh, he looks like Daft Punk, like the guys from Daft Punk, which I've only heard a couple of their songs. They're okay. Shaka is, logic, good type of thing. Don't really, he, that's probably going to be like a helmet that he'll take off at some point in time. And we'll see what happens with that. I also kind of wanted to throw in, he reminds me a little bit of like Tron. Not Tron from the original Tron movie, but Tron like from Tron Legacy. A little bit more in the way that his like design is and everything, with like the more smooth angles and stuff like that, and like the cool looking design that his clothes have and everything. Don't really know exactly where that's gonna go. But yeah, I wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, I'm mostly gonna just be using the Daft Punk for Shaka's face claim at the moment, or for his placeholder at the moment. So we have that. Then we have Vegapunk 2, who is Lilith, or the evil variation. And kind of the way that I kind of pictured her, because I was looking up like evil female robots, because like Lilith, out of all of the, Lilith, and then we're gonna get to York at the end, but Lilith is kind of the one that clearly seems to be like the most humanoid. We have not seen any indication that she is a robot, whereas Atlas is most definitely a robot, Pythagoras is most definitely a robot, and Edison are most definitely robots. We definitely saw that in this chapter, that those ones are all robots. Shaka is a little bit more of like, well, we haven't exactly seen what's under his helmet, and we haven't seen what's, like anything along those lines that indicates whether he's human or not. So we'll see what happens there, because we don't know exactly how long all the clones have been around again. But with Lilith, I was looking looked up like evil female robots. And yeah, there's I think there's female versions of like the T-1000 of like the different Terminators and stuff. I believe, again, I think in like one of the newest movies, there's like one that's a female but doesn't know that she's a Terminator. She thinks she's human. I've never seen any of the Terminator movies, so please don't ask me about that. Do not ask about that. I do not know. But one of the things that popped up for evil female robot was a robot that's called Maria from the movie Metropolis, which was a silent movie that came out very early on in like Hollywood history. And it's like a dystopian type of society type of a thing, and there's like an evil robot that ends up impersonating a different robot, or ends up impersonating someone else. And I like her design; she's kind of cool looking. But I'm like, no, I can find something better to use as a placeholder for Lilith for the time being. And I'm like, I typed in, scientists in anime, and I'm like looking through the list, and I'm like, well, I know a couple of these, like Senku from like Dr. Stone was on the list. I don't remember if actually Vegapunk was on the list or not, but that might just be because like we don't know exactly what Vegapunk looks like at this point in time, so they didn't throw him on there. Although number one on the list, Bleach reference, was Kisuke Urahara. Mayuri was nowhere on this list, and Mayuri would take great offense to that. But yeah, they had Urahara on the list. He was like number one, and like Senku was like number two. But one of the other ones that popped up on the list that had not popped up into my head for what to use for this was Attack on Titan, was Haj Zoe. And they see her, and I'm like, perfect. That's exactly what I want, because Lilith is this representation of Vegapunk's evil tendencies. She was going to raid different pirate ships. She's taken money from different pirates, probably a lot, probably handed in different pirates to the government to get their bounties and stuff like that if they show up anywhere near Egghead Island. I mentioned in one of the previous videos that because I don't remember if we ever find out exactly whether it was Caesar or whether it was Vegapunk that sold Kaido the numbers. And I had the theory that maybe it was like Lilith's version of Vegapunk, the Lilith version that sold Kaido at like the behest of the government, of just like, sell it to him and you can use it for funds. and she's maybe the one that sold him the numbers. But then again, there's also the whole thing of like that may have been Caesar that did that, but we don't know the exact full-on history of the numbers. But like, so she may be the one that did that. So I was just like, well, throughout the course of Attack on Titan, Haji holds. Now, admittedly, it's never stated one way or the other whether or not Haji is male or female. Even like with the Japanese translations, I don't think there's an exact answer for that, and they're usually referred to just as Haji, as Haj, or something along those lines. Even by other people around them. So, and even like the voice actors have never been stated one way or the other that whether or not it's a he or a she. But that was the best one that I could come up with that I wanted to use, that I actually know who this person is. So, throughout the course of the thing, Haji ends up keeping 2 Titans to study that, after the first invasion, everything with, with Eren turning into the Titan, they keep 2 of the Titans so she can study them. And then they, of course, end up dying. And then she is she asks very invasive questions of Eren and of other people. She is very determined to complete her own research. And the quote that's going to be on the end of this video is actually from Haji, because from Haji, I've seen it pronounced a couple of different ways, sorry. Still have to get back into finishing up Attack on Titan. And then doing those things where I talk about the series, talk about the ending of it. In a bit more detail than I already did, but we see her, and she kind of kamikazes at the end of the series. Unfortunately, I really liked her, but she's she talks about the fact that they've come, they've also had to sacrifice like their own comrades at times, which is a direct reference to Erwin and other various comrades that they've lost over the course of the series. We see how intense she is when it comes to stuff. She's the one that developed, like the thunder spear that they use against the Titans and everything. So she was what I wanted to use for Lilith. So we're going to use Haji for Lilith for Vegapunk 2 Lilith, the evil version. So she's that placeholder for now. And then we're going to go into Edison, Vegapunk number 3, Edison, or the Thinking, or Flare. I like Flare better. Flare just has more of a flair to it, obviously. Clearly, I talked about Edison in the previous Vegapunk video, where I talked about, just Thomas Edison in general, and just kind of like ideas for that. I love the fact that at least in the fan translation, I don't know if it's going to be in the official translation, but they have Edison proclaim Eureka at least once. And I really liked the show Eureka when it was on Sci-Fi. So I was trying to find like different cute little robots that could be a representation, because like this version of Vegapunk, the Edison version, seems much more on the small and compact side. So I was looking like cute, adorable robots and stuff like that, or like cute robots in anime or whatever. One of the ones that popped up for the cute robots in anime was Mononkuma from Danganronpa, which I've not seen Danganronpa, but just the fact that this bear is like half good but half bad looking implies that this thing is probably terrifying. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to use that. And then I also like the show Chobits, and I'm going to use another Chobits reference in this later. But there's Sumomo, who is just this little tiny, she's like a little assistant robot that belongs to one of the characters. There's like the main character's best friend has this robot, and then at one point, because he wants to not have a robot anymore, because he actually wants to show the woman that he loves her, not because of anything else, but because of who she is, he gives his friend, the main character, the other little helpful robot. And they get along great. And Sumomo is adorable, but I'm like, not quite. I don't remember if Sumomo has any defensive capabilities. And then I'm sitting here going, well, what else can I do? And on my phone right now, I'm playing Disney Mirrorverse, and there is the very different variations of different Disney and Pixar characters, and one of them is, of course, a different variation of Eva from WALL-E. And because I'm a Disney and Pixar nerd, I'm just going to use Eva as the example for this, for Edison, because I can. Eve is awesome in the movie. I love Eve in the movie, and she's great in the game. She's got like lasers and a a shield and laser cannons and everything. She's great. But so I wanted to go with that because she's just adorable. Edison is like much more like looks much more compact than he probably the way that he looks. I mean, he's probably bigger than the Chewbacca doll. He might be more like Rainy's size in that regard. We also see him like in comparison in size to like a cat because he's just like, and I'll even take help from this cat at some point in time. Cat meow tries chasing him. Edison seems to be the one that comes up with like, because he's like the flair. He's probably the one that comes up with all these different ideas for different like the different gadgets and inventions and everything like that they make because we see Edison and Lilith and Pythagoras all kind of watch when Sanji and Nami's group of the Straw Hats have to fight against like Jinbei, the Seraph Jinbei, and they're just like, oh, this is wonderful data and everything. And oh, I've just Eureka! I've just had an idea of something else to make, blah 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 blah, and we see that running around happening. And so Edison seems to be the one that like makes up all these different blueprints and everything. So he may have been like the one that initially thought of like the food replicator and the recycling dog and the clothing thing and a bunch of those other things. And I mean, like, I'm sure like the other ones all also clearly come up with ideas, but they're all also somewhat a little bit linked. And maybe some a little bit more than others. Like Pythagoras and Edison might be a little bit more linked together than maybe like Pythagoras is with like Lilith in that regard. Same thing with like Atlas, which I'll get to in a moment. But we see kind of that interaction between those ones. Edison's like the one that comes up with the ideas to a degree, or like maybe like all the different ideas kind of flow through him, and then he can like draw up the different designs and everything like that for the blueprints and like the basic idea for it. And then like the other ones can kind of like help expand on it. Lilith seems to be in charge of getting the funds, and then Pythagoras is just like, I have an idea, or Edison is like, I have an idea, and then we have Pythagoras, number 4. So yeah, Eve is going to be the representation for Edison. I just wanted to go with that because I can. It's my list of things to use, so I'm going to do that. And then we have the Vegapunk number 4, who is Pythagoras or Wisdom. I was sad because I can't find a triangle on him anywhere, and I wanted him to have a triangle on him, so I was sad about that, but okay. And I'm sitting there looking at this, like I was, rereading the chapter this morning that's a little bit more better translated version and a much more cleaner look at the pages and everything than just like the spoilers. And like, there's actually a moment where, and I missed this when I was reading through on just like the rough translation one, I missed this. It is, we see the Edison body, we see the Pythagoras body, and it's it's like this big, more bulking robot than like any of the other ones tend to look. I mean, like, yeah, Atlas is like this big robot, but she has like the appearance of like a child or so, preteen-ish type thing. And with Pythagoras, he just straight up looks like a giant robot, and he has like this little head that like just pops off at one point in time, and then goes back in. It was like with little tiny arms, and then goes back into the bigger body and like control the bigger body. I'm like, okay, that's adorable. That is so cute. Pythagoras seems to one that does the data entry on things, because like we see him doing like this, working on the computer and putting in like the result of like what they just kind of got back from like the test that happened with the Seraph Jinbei going up against the Straw Hats, because they was like, oh, this is amazing data, and it's just like so much data that we can use and everything like that. And he's like thinking of the consequences of like accelerating the accelerating how quickly the different seraphim mature and everything. So don't know exactly if that's going to mean like he's the one that takes care of that type of stuff, or he's just one was like, well, this could happen or that could happen. Like he's the one that comes up with like, this is all the data that we have on this at the moment, and depending on what happens, this could go here, this could go here, and this could go here. This could go wrong. This one does this. We'll try this test, and then we'll go from there. He may be the one that's like thrown out a bunch of stuff too, depending on stuff. He may have been the one that like Bonnie found the lightsaber. Might be going with that. And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, I know that they say one of them, and I think it's the Edison one, talks with a certain type of an accent, but since I don't know enough about Japanese to determine that, I don't know what that means. For some reason, I think it might mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I do not know. I haven't seen this specifically stated one way or the other. It's either probably something to do with more like it's probably like an accent from like a specific region of Japan, but I have no idea which one. I want to say it was like Kanze or something like that. Again, do not quote me on that one. I don't remember. Which I don't know, could be more like a high class accent, could be a more low class accent. Don't know. It's not the old man accent that we see that like the Lilith version has. Which again, that'll be kind of funny to see in the anime. So we don't know too much there, but like for the placeholder for Pythagoras, I am going to use Robbie the robot from Lost in Space because you can't stop me. Because I'm like, I want something that would work for that. That's like a bigger robot. And it's like it's one of the more famous ones. Or just like Robbie the robot, Lost in Space. My dad grew up watching like the original Lost in Space. By the way, one of the girls that was one of the daughters in The Sound of Music is also plays the daughter in Lost in Space. I think it's one that plays like the middle daughter. Don't remember her name. I apologize. Lisa was the oldest. Brigitte, I don't remember. Sorry. It's been a while since I've watched Sound of Music, and I love the movie anyway. But she played the daughter in the original version, and then in the they did like a remake film in like the 2000s that had like Matt LeBlanc in it, and that one was okay. Matt LeBlanc did not play the daughter. I don't remember who played the daughter. But yeah, they had like a Robbie the Robot there and everything. So it's just like Robbie the Robot is Pythagoras for now until something else pops up. And then we have Dr. Vegapunk 5, who is Atlas or Violence or Wrath, depending on which way you want to put it. And I love the fact that it's just like Lilith is just straight up evil. Just the evil. Evil is that one there. It's not flair, it's not thinking, it's not that, it's not this, it's not that, it's just evil. Same thing with Shock, it's just good, but logical. So does that mean Lilith is like illogical? But no, she still seems pretty logical and everything. Vegapunk 5 for Atlas. A lot of people made the Astro Boy reference commentations on that. Comparisons there. I went with the Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot. Want more explanation of that? Check out the previous video I did about Vegapunk. So Jenny is going to be the representation for Atlas at the moment. Also, we see Atlas a tiny bit in this chapter, like one or two panels or something like that, not very much. But again, they're running around smashing things, doing like, she's probably the one that like does most of the initial tests about a lot of different things, like as it goes through different development. And then like Pythagoras is probably the one that like puts all of that data into the computer and everything after seeing what, the data that like, Atlas sends back or something like that. And then we have Vegapunk number 6, York, or Greed, or Desire. Not Yoke, like what it originally looked like it was translated as, but York, as in like New York. And this was the one that I had the most thoughts about. Mostly because most of the other ones were fairly straightforward. So, what we see, and she gets like a double page spread, and we see a fair bit about her. We see like there's all these different assistants all over the island that like help the different robots. That help the different Vegapunks. And they probably know each one of them very well. Most of these people are probably different experts in like their own field of different, history, technology, and stuff like that like Vegapunk has probably found and brought here. So it's like a giant collective of scientists. And brought them all together. Kind of like the Manhattan Project to a degree that was going on during World War II. That led to nuclear weapons. Vegapunk talks about basically like concept of, if I could find it was like undeterminate fire or something like that, I could make something like the sun. Frankie, that sounds cool, but like a bad idea. Also, I love the fact that at one point when like Shaka is like introducing himself to the Straw Hats, Usopp's like, but we already met 2 other Vegapunks. We met the Lilith and then the voice, and you're Vegapunk. Does that mean I'm Vegapunk too? Thank you, Usopp. But going into York, and New York is in like the city that never sleeps, possibly. I know there's also like, New York is named after like York as in like York from like somewhere in like Europe, probably in like the UK area. Is partially named after that, is like where that comes from as well. Although New York had various different names over the course of its, settling and everything. But what we see is that the York version, the greed, the desire one, seems to be the one that has the purpose of performing these different bodily functions. And then, like, we see her gorging herself and eating and just like so much food. And then she goes to the bathroom because one of the other ones says, "Oh, it's like Pythagoras." I said to him, "Was like, oh, I need to go to the bathroom, but I can't do that," and everything. Like Lilith, or York is the one that goes and does that, and then York goes to sleep. After she's like slimmed back down after going to the bathroom, she's got like a huge metabolism and everything. I'm like, Luffy, Bonnie, I found your daughter. We've seen so many like pink-haired characters in One Piece over the years. I kind of want one of them to have like a different colored hair than like pink. I wouldn't mind if one of them had like orange colored hair like Nami. That would be kind of fun. Not the only one that would probably have black colored hair is like Atlas, just because she's the only one that we saw that has like that dark colored setup in regards to part of her hair. But I don't know. I don't know. We haven't had like some blondes for a little while. Wano had some interesting haired colors here and there and everything with like Hiyori and Tama and Toko. And that. So we'll see what the kind of like the color schemes end up being for all these different Vegapunks. We'll see how that goes. Some of them are probably going to end up being on like the cover of the Tonkobon when it comes out. So we'll see what their color schemes end up being. But I was just like, Luffy, Bonnie, I found your kid. She eats a lot and she's got narcolepsy. Although the narcolepsy is a little bit more prevalent in like Ace than it was in Luffy and Garp. Yeah, Garp, very narcoleptic. Yeah. So there's that. And kind of the first thing that I thought of when I was like looking through this for like different robots or something like that to use as a representation. Again, it's not stated whether or not York is a robot. She could be some form of a robot. Clearly, again, she's like connected to the other Vegapunks because like they're all somewhat connected, like an interweaving web, but some of them have like more thought independence in certain areas from what it seems because they have a bit more of a purpose in certain areas. But we saw like in the initial chapter where we saw Shaka and Lilith interact with each other, Shaka had to like pull Lilith back from like doing something stupid and attacking the Straw Hats. But yeah, so kind of the first one I thought of was like, because like York has a little bit more of like an innocent look to her to a degree. So I was like, well, there's Chi from Chobits I could use. She's very innocent and very much loves life. But I'm like, no. And so I was just like, okay, well, what other robots are there? And like probably like a bunch of the other Vegapunks, they probably have the ability to defend themselves. So I'm just like, well, what do we have? So just like, oh, that'll work. So I settled on Ritsu, or the autonomously intelligent fixed artillery. Sure, I botched that first word the dog left. From Assassination Classroom. I have seen Assassination Classroom all the way through. I love the series. It's so great. I love the fact that Koro Sensei in the English is voiced by Usopp. Voiced by the guy that does Usopp. I find that hilarious. But the thing that we see, for Ritsu throughout the course of that series is, of course, she starts out as just like she only has her mission of like kill Koro Sensei, and then by the end of it, she gains emotions and everything because Koro Sensei, remodels her and everything and gives her that, more free will of her own. And by the end of the series, it's stated that she's like downloaded herself into the internet and she's like living her best life all over the internet and everything. Also, I'm not going to be surprised if one of them ends up having pink hair somewhere along the lines because Oda likes girls with pink hair. Shirahoshi, Rebecca, Toko, take your pick. Pink hair is fun. And so we see that with Ritsu. So just like I'm just going to use Ritsu for the representation for York for the time being until we get like the actual full-on color scheme of the characters and stuff like that for like the concept art for the anime. And then I'll probably redo this chart. But for now, that's what we get. And the things that I wanted to point out when it comes to York was, so how does this setup work? Because we see Pythagoras mention that he needs to go to the bathroom. We see I think Edison mentions that he's hungry. Same thing with like Atlas. They mention that they're hungry or that they need to sleep or that they're, they need to go to the bathroom. And then we see York being the one that's doing all this stuff. We see York just like gorging herself on like all of this food and everything. Like everybody's bringing her food. And then she, kind of goes off and goes to the bathroom. And then she comes back and she's much more slimmed down. And then I wish metabolisms work that way. And then she goes to sleep and they say, oh, she's doing her, her next hibernation cycle or whatever, eat, dump, nap cycle again. And we see that going through with York. So I'm just like, so kind of the thought that I had, the initial thought that I had in this regard, and a little bit more once I saw a little bit more of the translation was, is it that York like is the one that like embodies all of these different needs, basic needs, sleep, go to the bathroom, eat, sleep, go to the bathroom. She's the one that like embodies those needs for some of the other Vegapunks. Maybe not necessarily Lilith herself and maybe not Shaka, but like specifically at least for Edison and Pythagoras and Atlas, who are the three that very much are definitely most likely robots. All most likely robots. But the thing is that they're robots, so they shouldn't have to eat or go to the bathroom or anything like that. But if they have a form of like a human brain, then they may still need to think that they have to do those things. And then like having Pythagoras be the one that does that, or not having Pythagoras, having York be the one that does that, she basically acts as like a placebo effect for the rest of them. And that could result in her being able to, just like, oh, the rest of these need to do all of this, everything for science and everything. And it's not that York is stupid or anything like that. She probably has like her own ideas this time as well. Maybe she's also some of the things of like when she sleeps, maybe she dreams up other ideas and then those get transmitted to Edison when she wakes up or something like that. I don't know. But I'm kind of thinking it's a little bit of like a placebo effect because it's like I'm looking at the panels and everything and I'm just like, well, we saw Lilith outside of the island. Shaka was somewhere on the island itself. We saw Atlas within the island. Same thing with Edison and same thing with Pythagoras. And like York is clearly on the island for Egghead. And like Lilith was outside of the island and she was like moving around and everything like that inside of the giant shark mech. So it's just like, well, I highly doubt that like Lilith is like somewhat like physically connected to York. And like the way that we see everybody else moving around, they don't seem to be physically connected to each other, which is kind of like, implied by the fact already that it's like they're all separate bodies, they're all satellite bodies. So there's no physical connection. So then how is the fact that York can gorge herself and do all this other stuff sending energy to the other Vegapunks? Is it that it is basically a placebo effect where the fact that it was like, well, part of Vegapunk is, eating and going to the bathroom and sleeping and doing those basic needs and everything, while the other ones can focus on doing all the other science, and the fact that they're like somewhat connected because it's like, oh, York, take a bite for me or something like that. I think is like what Atlas says, hungry punch, and then like, York goes and eats and then goes to sleep. And we get that stuff and like, it's just like, so how does that exactly work? Like, how does that energy transfer work? It was like the need to do that repressed in the other ones, and then therefore it's like it's heightened inside of York, and that's why she does all of that. Why she's the one that does that. But that was basically my thought process for that. I didn't really have anything else to go on with that because I couldn't think of anything else that would apply to that for like why York would be doing that. So I'm like, well, I can't really think of anything else that would apply to that for why that would be the way that it is. That was what I had. It's just like is it like a weird version of like a placebo effect or something like that, because I was trying to think if there's like an example of that in anything that I could think of. And I'm not thinking of anything. Well, okay, I can think of a slight thing. During the Doctor Who, during one of the Capaldi runs, when he still has Jenna Coleman as his, has Clara as his, companion, they end up on a weird spaceship in the future, and they have like these sleep pods. And the sleep pods are designed that you sleep in the sleep pod for like a very short amount of time and then you're like fully rested. So admittedly, the sleep pods are a weird, twisted thing that ends up resulting in like the bad thing that they have to fight for the episode, but just like the basic concept of like sleep pods that you sleep on, and then, like it helps you, you get like a full night's rest in like, I don't know, 10 minutes or something like that, and then you can go right back to sleeping or right back to doing everything else that you need to do. Was that like the concept that they were going with it? Like, oh, she can sleep and everything else, sleep, eat, go to the bathroom, do that types of stuff for the other one, so that way they can just continue to focus on science. It's what I thought of. I couldn't think of any other example that would work for. That was what I had. So that's what I have for this video. I thank you for watching. I am going to go see Film Red tomorrow, so I'm very happy about that. I'm going to go with my mom. She's like, do I need to know anything? I'm like, I'll give you a rundown the night before. It's okay. She knows enough about One Piece that it's fine, but still just going into it, a little bit more information. And then I will do a review about Film Red that'll probably be up on Monday, Tuesday range. So I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you live in the U.S., please vote on Tuesday. Please vote. Please vote. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. I led us all to this point. I kept moving forward, even if it meant killing so many of my comrades. It's time I take responsibility for that.